BrassFacts here. Today what the fuck? Today we're finally gonna get around to reviewing my B&T Tp9. Which, as an aside, might be the worst name for a firearm in the industry. I'm talking about this, not this. You guys know the drill. Going to divide this video up into 3 parts with dog footage sprinkled throughout to keep my audience retention levels up. Overview, observation, and opinion. As the name implies, I will keep the majority of opinions in the opinion section, conclusions, and all that stuff as well. Everything else will attempt to stick to the facts, the whatever. The TP9 is a semi-automatic version of the famous PDW Mp9. The goal of a PDW is to offer a small and compact form factor while still offering a stock for increased controllability over a pistol. When you buy a TP9, you'll typically buy it as a pistol, so no stock. For some reason, the VFG is included in the box, and you'll have it as this, quite unusable. Then you will typically either add a brace or just go straight to SBRing it as a Form 1, and then you get to put the stock on and actually finally have some fun. The brace doesn't actually fold, it will only get to about here-ish, which means a lot of the appeal of this firearm is lost with the brace. So yeah, this firearm needs to be SBR'd. Or rather, it needs a VFG and a stock. You do you. And I'll kind of touch on why, beyond just the folding capabilities. Size is probably the biggest selling point of this firearm, which is a phrase I've never ever heard as an Asian American. You know what? Subtle racism aside, this guy is really small. 11 inches overall length when folded, compared to an MPX-K, which is actually one of the smaller, PDW, PCC firearms. It is nearly 50% smaller. The MPX-K is roughly 14.5 inches overall length while folded. So 3.5 inches might not seem like a lot, but ask your girlfriend. I need to stop. In practice, I find you need about 15 inches to remotely even consider being used as a proper concealed backpack gun. But even then, at 15 inches, you're going to be taking up a lot of your cube space in your backpack. The TP9 is unique, thus, in that it approaches that 10-inch overall length mark. Watch this video up above where I talk in detail about why size matters. Onto the firearm itself. The TP9 has ambi controls, safety on both sides, ambi charging handle, ambi mag release. The bolt drop, however, is not ambi. There is a single rail section which cannot be moved here at the 3 o'clock, and a standard, albeit polymer, rail section up top. There are these very small sights right here. The other one's hidden below the laser aiming device over here. That kind of act more as emergency backups should you be running this slick. Almost no one will be using these sights at all. They're not very good. There's a single attachment point over here, which you can mount your sling to. This is actually not a direct blowback design. It's instead a rotating bolt design, kind of like those old PX4 Storm pistols that caught on so well. There are magazine sizes between the 30 and the 15 rounder, but considering it's either flush or not flush, I only stick with the 30 or 15 rounder. This straightforward package can be had for a whopping $1,900. Whew, is it worth it? You know you're the only reason why people watch my stuff? Yeah. You're the star of the show. What? I've had this PDW for about 1,400 rounds, and here are my observations. The first and most important thing to note, this thing is begging to be suppressed for cool factor, usability, whatever. Since it mounts to the suppressor, that is, mounts to this thing up here, this little barrel shroud. This is not the barrel stops roughly about here. It requires a special suppressor, and there are no adapters to convert your 9mm suppressor to work with this thing. So, in true Gucci Swish watch fashion, this can only take one suppressor, and it's a proprietary suppressor made by B&T. However, presently, in 2021, there are no suppressors on the market anymore. They're all gobbled up. I did notice a price drop for suppressors in around July timeframe, which seemed to imply they were pushing a new model to the market. However, due to COVID or whatever the fuck, these never came out. So regardless for the reason, you can't put a suppressor on this firearm right now. Damn. In terms of usability of this firearm, the interface with the TP9 is acceptable, certainly workable, but a lot of this stuff feels really half-assed. It feels like B&T was trying to stay true to the original Mp9 design, which is a little frustrating because it is somewhat antiquated. The stock is fine, it clips in, stays really out of the way, and when you need it, it comes right out, no problem. However, here are where the issues begin. Let me get this out of the way. The safety, while really good for righties, is very minuscule for lefties. It's very much cut down, and even after a lot of practice with this firearm, occasionally I will begin to slip off the safety and have a botched safety deployment. And that's not something you really want to have, especially when I have cold hands or I'm wearing gloves. I wish they had full-size safety on both sides. The mag releases are fine, no issues there. Another issue with this firearm is this bolt release is only on one side, which is fine as a righty, but as a lefty, I have to break my fire control grip to reach it, and I have to do this weird thingy. You can train for it, but it's certainly weird and awkward when you get used to it. The charging handle initially gave me worries, being this plastically flimsy thing, but I guess after all this use time, it hasn't even come close to breaking, so I guess that concern didn't end up realizing itself. Reloads into this small area, unlike what another channel said, are actually not that big of a deal. You bought a $2,000 PDW, you better put the reps in, you better fucking train with it. So yes, it's a tad jank, but even after 500 rounds, I was getting pretty fast, and in my opinions, these reloads are fast and clean. And most of the footage you can see are under night vision. No problems reloading under complete darkness. You can buy a flared magwell if you want, however, and that does aid with the reloads. So yeah, ergos on this thing are fine. They're not MP5 bad, but they're also not as good as an AR-15, so sort of right in the middle, with a significant difference between both between righty and lefty usage. Here's a big point of frustration, the side rail right here. For the life of me, I cannot understand why there are zero provisions to not only remove this rail, but move it somewhere else. This thing is stuck here, which is really frustrating because it's the most expensive PDW on the market, but it's also the least configurable. Seriously, when the Uzi Pro has a more versatile rail layout, you know you have a problem. For once, and probably the last time, it actually paid to be a lefty here. I can set up all my controls on the right side and access it with my thumb while using the forward grip, which is something righties cannot do with this weapon. So, not sure what happened there considering the rest of this firearm seems to hate lefties. Recoil with this guy is interesting. Certainly better than a direct blowback and a lot less harsh, and the felt recoil is very low. However, the apparent recoil, the muzzle rise, is actually quite high for how low the recoil feels, if that makes sense. I'm guessing it's due to its small size and aggressive pivot point, but this firearm wants to travel up and towards your strong side. So up and to the left for me, up and to the right for basically everyone else. Added torque, however, that you can apply with the VFG really helps you tame the gun and have it recoil in place and return to your initial point of aim, thus further cementing this as a Form 1 required weapon. Even with the VFG, however, this gun will and can get away from you, especially under intermediate rates of fire or higher rates of fire. If you're not doing your part at manhandling this gun and cranking down on this VFG, your recoil pattern or control will be pretty abysmal. Yeah, you have to really crank down this and make sure you're actually pocketing the stock, otherwise you're going to get that muzzle rise I mentioned. Some extra points to note. The magazines are pretty good. Here's a small boy. But honestly, they better be fucking good. They cost $45 in true, Swiss fashion. I've never had a malfunction with these, and they hold up quite well. As a random aside, if you have a really full magazine and you mash that thing in there, occasionally the top round will plop out and sail out of the ejection port. That could theoretically cause a malfunction, though I have yet to have it happen. Both steel, brass, and some reloads that fucked up my barrel all worked just fine. Well, aside from the reloads, but those actually didn't really malfunction that much. As a quick aside, those reloads did cause damage to my barrel. Had to send the barrel back to B&T. They didn't know what the hell was going on, but they just sent me back a Mp9 barrel instead because they were all out of Tp9 barrels for $250. So this guy actually has a machine gun barrel in it, which is kind of cool. This firearm comes with a provided sling. This thing isn't airsoft tier, but it's not exactly, modern, up to modern sling standards. Poor adjustability and really just doesn't have that many features. I've been considering buying a better sling, but unfortunately I can't seem to find anything. Congratulations, guys. We've successfully bullied the industry to not make modern single-point slings anymore, which is a win, but now I'm stuck with making that sling work. Hypothetically, I'd want a single-point sling with some bungee, so I can carry it very taut to the shoulder, but I can also punch it out and use it, as a stocked weapon. All right. It's time. It's time to talk about the trigger. The single biggest issue and point of contention with this rifle, and God, I can't believe I call this a rifle. Fuck you, ATF. But yeah, it's the trigger. It's not only bad, it's potentially a deal breaker for a lot of people. Like many European machine guns, it has a ridiculously long travel. If you've messed with an F2000 or P90, you know exactly what I mean. And like those two abortions of gun design, this is also a bullpup, right? The trigger mechanism is over here, trigger's up here, magazine is here. So you combine a long, heavy travel, heavy trigger weight at the wool, and massive amounts of creep, and you get this piece of shit. Not only is the reset kind of far, right? It sends you all the way forward, but it actually takes a bit to engage, right? So I'm letting off of it right now, and it's getting stuck a little bit. And then it finally goes, and look how far out I am. And there's still all this this travel you need to take up to after you've hit the reset. I am of the opinion that Glock triggers are actually not bad at all. So saying this trigger is bad is saying something. The trigger does break in and get significantly lighter, and you can get an aftermarket trigger shoe, but you'll always be stuck with the weight and the pre-travel and all that nonsense. This is still better than a pistol in terms of usability with the stock, but this trigger for a lot of people will close that gap between pistol and this and reduce how much value added for running something like this. With slow and rapid fire, like zeroing, you find yourself very often fighting this heavy ass pull, and your performance will be impacted. Medium rate of fire, you're fine, and that's probably the most likely use case. You can get used to it there. Alright, time for to steal a gun thoughtism. The feels. I kind of feel like I need to talk about the feels here. The TP9 is very much an acquired taste. It is not a refined shooting experience. It recoils less than a direct blowback, but more than any other PDW. It's got okay controls. The trigger fucking sucks. Yes, it's absolutely functional, an effective way to increase your range and capability over a pistol, but it's gonna fight you every step of the way, especially as a lefty. Which is really odd considering this is a $2,000 pistol from a company that is known for Swiss workmanship. Yes, I know it's a rebanded gun, not an original design. Yeah. I would absolutely not recommend this firearm to you if you have gaps in your capability as an armed, prepared citizen. If you don't have your dream rifle with your dream optic, do not get this. Sort that out. If you don't have night vision, don't get this. Do not buy this as a fun gun. It is not only not worth the cost over some of the cheaper options, but weapons in this same category, like the MPX, have a seriously improved shooting experience over this guy in basically every aspect. If you want to buy the TP9, it should be done with a very clear objective in mind. You or I want a firearm that is designed around reducing overall length at the expense of all else. The use case of the PDW, in my opinion, is as follows. Once again, I have this video up here, goes into way more detail. But the PDW exists to be your transition to WROL weapon. The world is actively going to shit, but it hasn't quite gotten the memo yet. You still need to go to work, You need to get gas, go to the gas station, you need to pay your bills, buy groceries, visit your friends, live your life, and running around with an AR everywhere will get you shot, put in jail, or probably worse, laughed at. A pistol will cover most of this use case, but sometimes having a stocked weapon is nice. Even the most experienced pistol shooter will begin to struggle when adrenaline is going, fatigue is there, and potentially even injuries. Suddenly, your amazing pistol shooting skills that get you out to even 50, 60 yards is now beginning to closer approximate a handheld spear versus an actual firearm. In this scenario, a stock absolutely helps. So, having a stocked weapon is absolutely a leg up, but concealability in this scenario is still king. Functioning in this gray area between civilized society and the beginnings of a collapse or just civil unrest is not the time you want to be standing out. Yes, an AR or even a PCC, large PCC that is, would be effective, but not when it comes to the expense of painting a large target on your back. Be it from aggressive, rioters, looters, whatever you want to call it, or even, air quotes, friendly police or National Guard trying to restabilize the situation, you don't want to be caught with a large weapon. You only want to go overt when it's time to and not a moment earlier. I feel like the previous years of unrest has really set the stage for not only why you want a more consistent firepower than a pistol, but also a textbook example of why running around with an AR is counterproductive in these early stages. When shooting still has consequences, and painting a target on your back is a great way to escalate into an unwinnable situation that has no good upsides. This 11-inch overall weapon, the TP9, fits in a work briefcase, your university bag, the passenger side of your car underneath a jacket, under a jacket on your person, Secret Service style, all of this. This is unrivaled levels of concealability that simply cannot be achieved with a 300 Blackout AR-15, an MPX, a Scorpion, or whatever. Even something like the smaller dedicated weapons like the MPX-K, the SIG Rattler, or other firearms like this, are a good 30% or so larger than the TP9. And that is the niche the TP9 lives in. If this niche makes you go, I'll just use my pistol until the rifle makes sense, and then I'll use that. Good on you, this ain't for you. However, personally, I think this niche makes a lot of sense. It makes just as much sense, or maybe even more sense, than the desire to own multiple AR-15s, sniper systems, etc. for the end of times. This is something that is far more pressing and realistic and, in some ways, ongoing. This is my use case and why I own a $2,000 gun with $1,000 of accessories and a $200 tax stamps that performs roughly on par with an $1,000 PCC. There are very few firearms that come close to its niche. And yes, as an aside, I'm going to try out the Flux Raider, but they're sort of unobtainium, and they also lack true safeties, which is sort of a turnoff, but I need to try one out. Also, versus stuff like stocked pistols, like the UBW, the Flux for the Glock, and those other chassis systems, I find these go a little too far down the power versus size, or continuum, and don't offer enough usability to use them over just using a pistol. Okay, that is my review of the TP9. This was obviously a lot more philosophy-based versus normal, but the reliability is fine. It works, the trigger sucks, it does what it's advertised to do. But when discussing something as pricey as this, I feel like making a use case example for it makes a lot more sense than really discussing the value or the lack of value, right? Because in terms of value, this is a terrible weapon. However, when you start thinking about the use case, it begins to make a case for itself. Unless you just want this to fulfill your MP7 fantasies, then in that case, this thing fucking slaps. Get one. Okay, that's been some brassy facts for you. Thanks for watching. See you guys around.